today, and I'm so honoured and privileged to have the amazing Andrew Hale come and talk to me today. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, to Andy, as I call him, to tell us about himself.
Well, hi Joe. Thanks for having me. It's always nice to share conversations with you. We've had many, I know. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, so I'm a behaviourist working over here in the UK. I'm a behavioural consultant for Pet Remedy and CAM and British Isles Grooming Associations. I do quite a few bits and pieces, and I've got a human psychology and therapy background. And as we'll talk about today, that's very relevant, I think, because when we start thinking about the kind of the individual lived experience, whether you're a human, a dog, a cat, or a horse. We don't talk about that enough, actually. So we'll explore that. So and now for the last 10 years, I guess, I've been working with predominantly reactivity and aggression, as people might see it, and I'm doing a little bit less of the in-person work now with dogs, sadly, because of my some health challenges. So now I'm starting to support wonderful colleagues and doing kind of mentoring and coaching. That's where I'm kind of at the moment, with a bit of counselling in there as well, because a lot of us are drawn to work in animal care because of parts of our own story, and actually that's important. There's a great little saying which is, from our pain we find our purpose, and many of us actually find our way to working in a very kind of humane, ethical way because of how we've been treated or we've seen others be treated in the past. So that's kind of where I'm at with things now.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, well, Andy and I have been meeting on in his safe space, and it's a wonderful experience. As he said, there's a bit of counselling in there, there's a bit of personal development, business development, and I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent with Andy, and he's been instrumental in supporting me, I suppose, and encouraging me to get this message out to this country, to Australia in particular. Unless people have been living under a rock, they would have heard of you, Andy. But I think across the world, Australia seems a little bit isolated from a lot of what's happening in the rest of the world, and that's why I feel I need to bring it to people's attention.
Well, I think it's always good. This is the beautiful thing now, isn't it? Of course, with having the chance to talk like you and I are now. We're both literally the other side of the world from each other, but we can have these wonderful, rich conversations. And I think for many of your listeners, the content that you bring, some of it will be um, uh, kind of supportive for what they're already thinking, but they might not necessarily have found a way of kind of bringing it together. And then there'll be others who'll be like, wow, that's really interesting. And I hadn't thought about that, because one of the things we have with dogs, I think we can look at other areas of society actually, but we're still talking about dogs here specifically, but there is just a bit of a chronic lack of awareness. That's the problem. People are unaware of what the dog um, in front of them needs, and and who they are and what they need, sort of thing. And we've been stuck in a certain paradigm for a long time, which has been about considering how to make them behave rather than actually understanding what that behavior intrinsically means for them. So we need as many voices as we can to start exploring this, I think.
Mm. Yes, I think everybody out there, all the dog guardians, they love their dogs. I'm hoping most of the people, they love their dogs, but they just aren't aware of who dogs are, of what that individual dog in front of them actually needs to thrive. And that's where I want to come in. I want to help people understand what we're seeing now. We've come a long way from basic obedience training and controlling dogs. It's a wonderful world we're moving into now, where dogs are teaching us a lot about themselves, but also who we are as well.
I love that, who we are as well. I love that because um, there's a reason why we have a certain view of dogs and behavior more generally, and it's very similar to the way that we might look at children and their behavior, actually, because I can only talk from a UK point of view. I'm sure it's probably similar in Australia. It does seem to be a Western thing, especially where we think about these are the behavioral norms that our children and our dogs are expected to be in. And this is where we come onto something that we call the good bad continuum, this notion that behavior is good through to bad. And supporting that is this notion, well, we need to reward good and we need to punish or ignore bad. And we're all indoctrinated in that to the point that we don't question it. And that's why, children can be treated a bit unfairly sometimes, as indeed can dogs, not because people are deliberately cruel or unkind. It's just because they see it as being, well, the behavior is the problem, so I must address it. And we want more of the good, don't we? We want less of the bad, don't we? In as far as it seems so obvious, until we ask really fundamental questions about who's actually deciding what good or bad is and what's motivating those narratives. And most importantly, what did the behavior that somebody else has judged as being difficult, bad, naughty, whatever, actually represent for the individual? And this is where we start to this notion of the good bad continuum starts to unravel a little bit,
Mm.
because many of us, myself, I would include in this, and many of your wonderful listeners will have been affected because somebody else has challenged their behavior that actually was just a representation of their need for safety or their need for relief. And this is the thing that I genuinely believe, that there are three things fundamentally that link us all, whether you're a horse, a dog, a cat, human. We all want to feel heard. What's the point of having communication? Behavior is communication. We all want to feel heard, especially when we're trying to communicate need. And behavior is an expression of need, the need for
Mm.
safety, the need for connection, the need for relief. We all want to feel safe, as I just mentioned. And physical safety is something we think about a lot, and that's what we tend to focus in on when we see another person, because we have a physical safety bias when we think of somebody else. Or I can see you are safe. But our own brain is just as interested in emotional and social safety. So we can be safe physically, but not feel it. And dogs are struggling often to communicate those safe, because a lot of the behaviors that we might see as being challenging or difficult are actually just them trying to create safety. And that brings me on to the final thing that connects us all, which is the thing I talk about a lot. And I think it's the most important word in the psychology of behavior, and that's the term relief. Relief. It's more important even than safety, in as far as if you don't find the relief you're seeking, you won't feel safe. So relief from physical pain, relief from emotional pain, relief from social pain. Those negative feelings and emotions that we might have, I say negative, but the ones that are unpleasant, I should say, we have them for a reason. And actually, if you look at the evolutionary biases of Mother Nature, emotions are the one thing that's been there all the way through. The wonderful Professor Mark Bekoff, I love when he says this. He says dinosaurs had feelings too. I love that, because of course they did. You can imagine mommy dinosaur wanting to protect her baby dinosaurs, baby dinosaurs playing with each other. It's the emotional stuff has stuck with us. Why? Because it's important. How can we stay safe if we don't feel things that are uncomfortable, that promote us to seek relief? Now, that relief might be running away. That relief might be finding something for the pain. That relief might be giving mum a hug. And I would say most of the big challenging behaviors from dogs are relief seeking. They're relief seeking. So this is a problem then when we think back to that good bad continuum, then, Joe, because if I've decided a behavior is bad, or a behavior is unwanted, or a behavior is unacceptable, then I'm likely to just focus on removing that behavior. But if that behavior was safety seeking or relief seeking, then what is it that I'm actually punishing or ignoring? And even in the positive dog training world, we have memes that say reward the good, ignore the bad. We have to start asking the question, what are we ignoring? And what are we rewarding, and why are we rewarding it? One final point on this, and this is the uncomfortable bit. We have to understand the coercive potential of reward reinforcement. This is very important. I know you've been diving into Alfie Kohn's book, Punished by Rewards, because I know you, I kind of mentioned it at some point. It changes your view on a lot of stuff. But if we think about this, the coercive potential of reinforcement, it does start to change things, because yes, we can use reinforcement to get a different behavior, But if we're using primary reinforcers, those things that the animal needs, like food or comfort or security, then there's the risk of just getting compliance through coercion. Now, compliance might not go with positive reinforcement, but actually, if you think about it, if punishment is punishing non-compliance, we've got to be careful that reinforcement isn't just rewarding compliance. So actually, it's about compliance. And that's a
Mm.
problem if the intrinsic needs aren't met first. So I'm not against training, far from it. But we have to understand that friction between structured learning, which we have a bias for, because we put kids through school and dogs through dog training classes, and experiential learning, what we actually are learning. And this is another psychological phrase, which is there is a difference between what we're taught and what we learn. And when we understand that as well, it starts to unfold again. Because what that means is if you think back to school and what you were taught at school, you won't remember much of it because you were taught a lot. But you'll remember the things that were relevant to you or things that were interesting or whatever. But you will still be affected by what you learnt intrinsically about feeling safe with peers, that bully at school, your connection to authority, even your connection to learning. Some people come out with a real hatred of learning. How crazy is that when you think about it, Joe? What are we doing to that education system where people can come through and they fear learning? But you see the same with dogs, what are we teaching them? So I've got my little mantra, if you like, which is learn, support, teach. Learn from the dog first. This is what you were kind of alluding to a minute, because they've got lots to tell us. We learn from them as much as we can about how they need to connect to the world, their sensory processing needs, big one, especially with what you wonderful people do at ACE about looking at sensory processing, but it's really important. That's one of my big kind of biases, if you like, is processing more generally, especially social processing. So we can learn from that, and then we support what we've learned. I've learned that from you. I'm going to support that first. And then if I'm going to teach anything, I want to try and teach things that are intrinsically valuable to that dog so they can survive. And a lot of that teaching, in inverted commas, doesn't come from constructed stuff. It is teaching them, actually, I'll hear you, teaching them, actually, I see you need that exit to safety. I'll be your return to safety. That is still learning.
Mm. That's brilliant, Andy. I mean, I'll go back to just quickly part of what you said there about, positive training. I think of luring as being very coercive. You have a dog, and I think of luring dog maybe into a car. So I think the potential for creating more fear next time you want them to get into the car is there, because the dog, if he's hungry enough, is going to go for that treat if you're using a primary reinforcer like food. But it's contingent. The food's only delivered if it's contingent on the dog doing what you want them to do. I would challenge that they felt good about that, because just a bit of food isn't going to help them make them feel good about it. But also it's going to make it worse next time, because you've convinced them to go in, but you haven't changed how they felt about the situation. You haven't changed the nervous system. You've done nothing to make the dog feel safer within that environment. So I think, yeah, that's an important part, that it can be quite coercive, positive training. And I think too, how hard it must be for dogs when most people who live with a dog don't understand what a dog's needs are to start with. And talking about the good bad continuum, a lot of behaviors we see are normal behaviors or relief seeking behaviors, as you say. And once we start to see that, once we know that and start to see that, it just makes your relationship with the dog so much better, so much easier. And I do believe once your relationship is one of understanding, and understanding when the dog's coming from a place of no, that's really important to develop that trust with your dog by understanding what they're saying to you.
Yeah, and this is what you said earlier about when we learn things differently, it affects, we can see the dog differently, but we see ourselves differently. And that last bit is an important bit, Joe, because, we have to be mindful, I think, when we find ourselves in, for want of a better word, an enlightened state of seeing this, and we've all had our own journey to get to that point. But it is genuinely hard for a lot of people because we also have to recognize their emotional state and their
Mm,
emotional needs too. And it's very tricky when somebody feels embarrassed and frustrated and angry and sometimes even resentful over their dog and their behavior. These things are tricky. So I think for us, when we have to find different ways of bringing people around to having that extra level of awareness. And uh, you're right, the general public, I think we all of us, collectively, I'm talking, not individually, have to take some responsibility for that lack of awareness because, for the last 40 plus years, I guess, when dog training became a thing, because even when I was growing up in the 70s in the UK, they'd be training their dogs particularly. We had Barbara Woodhouse on the telly, that was about it.
mm,
So then it became this big thing, and people have been taught how to teach sit and expect it all the time, even if the dog can't do it.
mm,
They've been taught to do the sit down, come stay. They've been taught to do things, but nobody's taught them about what pain looks like, about what stress looks like, about developmental stages, about body language.
mm,
I say nobody, but that the majority isn't. So actually, the general public then have been really misinformed and ill-equipped. And I think we have to step back and think, well, why have we got this big rise in behavioral challenges? You have the hardcore aversive lot who want to blame the reinforcement. You have the reinforcement want to blame the punishment. We all know that punishment doesn't help. I know, but actually, none of it helps. Either side of that. If it's because the dog is just screaming out, no, I'm not feeling heard. I don't feel safe, and I can't get relief for what I'm trying to communicate. And also, we are losing social bonds through a big emphasis on compliance-based training, whether that's reinforcement or punishment.
mm,
Punishment does more harm. But actually, even if a dog's trying to communicate something, especially looking for that secure attachment, that return to safety, and they're being that behavior is being trained into another behavior that the caregiver finds more appropriate in inverted commas. But even if it's being done in a nice way, if that animal still isn't feeling safe or relief, it's still as damaging, Joe. So it
mm,
is quite a big thing we have to consider here. So uh, I'm very aware of the process when we think about working with the general public, especially, and we have to find ways to kind of work through these things. And something you said a moment ago about like the car example is a good one because you mentioned there that if the dog is fearful, it's not going to help. And I think we have to recognize that training generally, you I say training itself isn't the issue. And I think, if you have a good relationship with your dog and they do have a nervous system that's generally then and they regulate relatively well, it doesn't really matter, you know.
mm,
And if we get them to do something they don't want to do, sometimes it's not the end of the world because that's what happens
mm.
in relationships. But it is those dogs who are really struggling, Joe, and there's many of them just constantly, and there's almost a level of sufferance there, I think, if they're not able to work through these things. But so I think these are the things we've got to look at. This is what I love about so you very kindly mentioned about my kind of influence for you. And I think there's somebody who's influenced both of us, which is the wonderful Sarah Fisher, who's not with us anymore, sadly. But for me personally and professionally, Sarah was really the driving force for me to start talking about some of these things because we need to.
Mm,
And we need to pose more questions. And we don't necessarily have to have all the answers, Joe. We just
mm.
got to start trying to have these conversations like we're having now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, Sarah was obviously the most incredible woman. So sadly we lost her at the end of last year, but she taught me so much and changed my thinking, literally changed my thinking about well, training dogs and dogs in general. A lot of her phrases that everyone knows is, the only experts on dogs are dogs themselves. And we have a wonderful phrase, NATO, no attachment to outcome, when we with ACE, with animal centered education, which is so liberating for us and liberating for the dog. I think when we can step back, and as Sarah used to say too, like watch more, do less, which is such a great way to work with dogs. The dogs have got a story, and we can sit back and listen to that story when we observe the dog when they're doing free work. And that works, yes, for free work, but then we can take that out into every aspect of the dog's life. We get to know their preferences, things that they avoid, and get to understand what the dog is saying. I mean, obviously, a lot of dogs and their behavior is affected by discomfort or pain. And, with ACE free work, with our observation, we get to see that, and it's quite amazing. Once that's addressed, once pain or discomfort's addressed, the difference that the dog in the dog, but it's just what else you learn about your dog when you sit back and watch and let them be the pilot of their own journey. And we just sit back and observe. It's wonderful. They are the most amazing teachers. Dogs, if we let them, dogs can be our most amazing teachers. I've got to thank Sarah so much for bringing that to me and to the rest of the world as well, because it's life changing, really life changing.
Well, it is, and I think this is the thing. So, in psychology, we have this kind of way of seeing things, which is the three lenses. And this kind of fits what you're saying here, because if you imagine we have three lenses about how we see behavior. The first lens is the academic lens, the science lens, the one that many professionals adopt, including dog trainers and behaviorists. And that's where we get to geek on certain things. So we might think we might focus in on pain or trauma or learning theory or skill sets, for kind of doing mechanics. And we can get very caught up in that lens as professionals. The second lens is the individual's lived experience of that pain, of that trauma, of that life behind the behavior, right? And sadly, those first two lenses don't always point in the same direction. And that's the case. That's the challenge we have with trying to invite, I think is a good word, other professionals to start thinking more about that other lens. Okay, you can do all that stuff, but what about that individual lens? And then the third lens is the third party observer lens, which the first lens is that too, the professional one, but it's a bit more objective, hopefully, the first lens. But that third lens, that third party observer, could be in the case of the dog, who's that middle lens, could be the caregiver, could be the next door neighbor, could be the family member, could be the person judging you in inverted commas from across the road. We've got to be better at thinking about that middle lens, because and it does take a lot to do. It takes a lot of reflexivity, which is about thinking about our own biases and our own judgments. I might think, oh, if only Joe would do this, this, and this, you'll be happy and be safe. Now that there's a saying, which is the path to coercion is often laid with good intention. So that's not me being horrible. That's me thinking, if only Joe, you could be this, you'll be happy and safe. But that's because I'm projecting my version of happy and safe onto you. Wow. And I think this is where all the extra layers come in. And we have to be the conversation for us, really, without the mindset shift. I did a workshop with Laura Donaldson a few years ago called Behavior Matters, but Mindset Matters More. Because actually, we've got to invite people to shift those perceptions a little bit and think about that middle lens, because then everything starts to unfold then a little bit more. And this is that shift from task to care that I've talked about for a long time, actually. And again, this is something that I bring a lot of terminology over from the human psychology side, but also from the human care side. And there's been a big thing about that in the UK for the last 20 years about moving from task to care. And then even the notion of true care, which is, I'll come on to that in a minute. But so task is very evident, obviously, in the dog training world, because so task is about the transactional nature of that relationship. Got to get the task done. And most of the public are stuck in a task mindset with their dog. I need my dog to stop pulling, stop barking. I need the dog to come when they get called. I need the dog to, not try and bite me or whatever it is, And the problem with a task-orientated approach is, if the task can't get done, somebody's to blame. It creates blame. You
mm,
know, the dog's not good enough, the caregiver's not good enough, they're not doing it right. But even the
mm,
professional who's advocating it often feels they're not good enough either because it's not working.
mm,
Punishment-based trainers, balance-based trainers are really just a manifestation of task at all costs. Doesn't mean they don't care, but it's just
mm,
like, well, whatever the dog's experiencing, you will do it. There is a lot of people in the child psychology area, which is doesn't matter how the child feels, they were just expected to behave.
mm,
This what we're talking about here is a shift to a care focus. So care doesn't mean we're not thinking about task because I do consultancy work with an assistance dog charity here in the UK, one that actually it was a project Sarah and I started actually. So these dogs have to do task because they could save somebody's life. But we know that that task is more likely if they are physically and emotionally well regulated. My husband's an end of life nurse. He couldn't do his job. It's a hard job unless he was physically and emotionally well regulated. So this starts to change the picture. So a care approach then is about a relational approach, learning from the other first. That's it. There's no big change other than that little shift. But that does take some courage, Joe. And we have to understand that word courage a little bit because uh, when we're caught up, especially our clients and especially professionals who have done something for a long time the one way, and it
mm,
kind of works in inverted commas. And I can tell you now, reinforcement always works for the handler. Even the punishment people don't understand that it's reinforcement that keeps them punishing because
mm,
that feeling themselves of, oh, look what I can do, look what I can
mhm,
make another do. That's quite reinforcing, right? If that's your
mm,
mindset. So it does take courage to think, right, I'm going to let go of that control. We see it all the time going back to free work. I've seen it quite recently. I was up there with the wonderful Matt. Sarah wasn't there, obviously, she's not here anymore. But we had something that we had to put on. Uh, Sarah's daughters very kindly said I could continue with the project, and so these were well versed trainers, really good trainers, very positive trainers. Seeing them having to let go of stuff in that space, you've seen it yourself at Tilly or whatever
mm,
else. When people are invited to kind of not step in, not get too involved, or maybe remove that extra tool, or it takes courage, Joe. It does, and
mm,
we have to remember that I think a little bit about how it does. But and I find that working with my clients, especially when I was doing a lot of in-person work, about half of those dogs were potentially dangerous dogs, and
mm,
this thing about hang on, we need to let the dog behave. But they're like, yeah, but the dog's biting people. It's like, yeah, well, we need to mitigate for that bit, but we still need to let the dog have some ability to tell their survival story. Otherwise, we'll fall back into the old patterns of suppressing behaviors, but then it popping out down the line. And what I would say to those who are really into terminology is I see spontaneous recovery, which often we see in the metric of kind of operant training, and well, hang on, we need to, with this, we're not, we've lost the reinforcement schedule, whatever. I actually see spontaneous recovery as a nervous system screaming back out again. That's
mm,
why it's like, so, because something still isn't right.
mm.
Still isn't right.
Yeah, it's that was yeah, that was just amazing. I'm trying to think on all the things you just told us then. I think for me the main thing is we need to change the narrative from how do I stop my dog doing this or how do I fix my dog to what is happening for my dog. What is causing the behavior, what's underneath. I mean, we just see the tip of the iceberg. We see the behavior, but there's so much underneath that iceberg. There's so much that goes on for that individual dog. As a dog, as a breed, as that individual dog. And we need to change the narrative. We need to start asking not how do we fix it, but what's going on for this particular dog right now.
Yeah, and that takes courage again. And I keep coming back
Yes.
to the word courage, but uh, I mentor, or through my safe space thing, I mentor wonderful colleagues like yourself. And a big thing that keeps coming up with colleagues that I support, especially those who want to move to a more dog-centered way of working and letting go of some of the old kind of kind of ways of working, is they know that there is no quick fix, but they feel under pressure to somehow show they can fix. And this is something that, we've all had to go through. But it takes courage to advocate for that dog, even when those around you are saying something different.
Yeah.
And this is why I think we need more education as professionals. And actually, I've got a course coming out, a little plug I know, but a course coming out in the autumn looking at all this stuff called care-centered working.
Brilliant.
To think about, all the stuff we're talking about, dogs, of course, but also care for the client and care for ourselves. It's very important. Bringing the dog-centered care lens and zooming out to everybody, really. And a big part of that course is counseling skills. And I think we need that.
Yeah.
Because the big question for you and I and our colleagues who are here is, okay, we found this wonderful place now where we think about things differently, and it's very expansive, Joe. God, as you know, when you shift that mindset, it's like, wow, God, so much stuff, but it's exciting and
Yeah.
overwhelming, of course, at times. But how do we bring more people? How do we bring more people to see this? Because it is the future, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as many people think they know about behavior, but in fact they just know how to make the dog behave. And so we have to unpick that and allow them the opportunity to shift. So we have to think about that. And one of the big things I hear all the time is, oh, it's such a hard sell to the public, though. The public won't get it. The public expect me to do this, expect me to do that. So we have to change how we work. Even this is something that you and I have discussed. I know about. We can do, and we don't have to work in the old ways. We can work however we like. And this brings me on to the three A's that I talk about a lot: the awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance. Because actually, that is the construct of how that mindset shifts. Because we have to start from recognizing that our role then is one of offering supported awareness. I'm here to support your awareness of your dog. I'm also here to support my awareness of your dog and you. It's an element of supported awareness. Not I'm going to come and make you do stuff, because we can't. I can't make somebody else think or do stuff. So awareness is important, but what we've got to understand is when we offer that awareness so if we imagine the client's awareness of their dog is they're being dominant, difficult, challenging, naughty, whatever words that they might label them with, because they're in that good bad continuum. They've got to label it and then deal with it. If we bring awareness, actually, I think your dog's struggling a little bit. I think your dog's in pain. Do you know what? Every dog I've worked with that has been potentially dangerous has been in pain, Joe. Most of them physically in pain, but if not emotional pain or social pain, it's no different as far as I'm concerned. In fact, we know on the brain doesn't know the difference much. Pain is pain. And especially social pain and physical pain with the work of people like Naomi Eisenberger and Matthew, what was his name now? God, brain's gone. Anyway, if it comes to me, it'll come to me. But they've proven with MRI research that it's the same part of the brain. And of course, that was started off with that research initially by Pansket back in the day, when he first started looking at social pain and social rejection and social separation distress, when he took puppies away from mom. And they were distraught, but then he injected them with a mild opioid, which is a painkiller, and the puppies cope better. So he hypothesized maybe there is pain involved in social separation, and now it's been proven. Oh God, what's his surname? His book is called Social, which is a great book, really looking at the how the brain's designed for this stuff. But anyway, so pain's important, and so if we bring that awareness, Joe, maybe your dog isn't being difficult, whatever else, maybe your dog's struggling. That in itself can be a barrier to them acknowledging that. Because acknowledgement's where guilt, blame, and shame lie often. And we have to support them in that. And that's another part of those kind of counseling skills, really. It's just recognizing that they probably feel a bit bad now. And if they can't sit with that and move forwards with it, it might stop them from acknowledging it. Oh, this is a load of rubbish. You're talking rubbish. You're a wet snowflake. I'll just go back to doing what I did. That's that cognitive dissonance stuff.
Mm.
And if we get to acknowledgement, what we need is really to get to acceptance. And what I would say to any dog trainers and behaviorists listening, but those amazing clients that everything worked out brilliantly, without knowing it, you took them through awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance. Because when we get acceptance, we get advocacy. You
Mm-hmm.
can't advocate unless you accept.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't advocate for you, Joe, unless I accept you. Otherwise, I'm advocating for a version of you that I've decided upon. I'm not actually
Yeah.
advocating for you. And this comes
Yeah.
to this notion of true care. True care. I can offer you care. I can offer you care, whatever I'm doing, physical care. If I was kind of a nurse, I could offer you emotional care, whatever. But um, true care is actually the care you need delivered in the way you want. That's true care, not just
Mm.
ticking boxes. And this is the friction between welfare and well-being. The
Right.
wonderful Dr. Robert Faulkner Taylor says welfare is often the enemy of well-being. Oh, let's have a look, Joe. Yeah, you're safe. Tick, yeah, yeah. Hair looks nice and neat. That's great. Yeah, I've had a wash today. Yeah, great. Thank you. Welfare needs met. But if you're struggling, if you feel lonely, if you haven't spoken to anybody for the last 24 hours, you see your well-being isn't met. That's
Mm.
this is the notion of true care. You see, this is all in the course. Plug again. So anyway, if we get to acknowledgement, acceptance is so people can acknowledge. Yeah, I can acknowledge my dog struggling, but if they don't accept it, they can fall back into old patterns. But acceptance is where grief lies, actually.
Yes.
Um, literally, if we have to accept that somebody's not with us, but also grief for the dog we don't have that we thought we were going to have, or whatever
Mm.
else. But also, acceptance is the place where we have to manage and change most of our expectations.
Mm.
So we have to support them, but actually, it's a freeing place, acceptance. We just need to accept that your dog is not going to be able to go down the beach at the moment, or we're going to have to accept
Mm.
the fact that maybe visitors are difficult at the moment because we know they're struggling. Now we can advocate for your dog. Great. So now we can think about getting those things, that management and adaptation in place, so we can reduce as many of those stresses as possible. And as you and I know, often that initial thing, oh, my dog struggles with dogs on the walk. Actually, when we look at that dogs more generally and we remove some of the general stresses and help a dog regulate, they didn't have a problem with dogs in the first place per se.
Yeah.
They had a problem because that nervous system just couldn't deal with that social processing. So everything
Mm-hmm.
changes, Joe,
Mm.
if we get
Mm.
to acceptance and advocacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I just going back to what you're saying there about welfare, and well-being, I think, would I be right in saying we look at the old, five welfare needs? What was that? What was it called? The five, oh, it was
Five
like
freedoms initially.
five freedoms.
Five
That's it.
freedoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I
And they were
assume people were just
lead.
stopping at that, just stopping at the five freedoms, but not understanding there's more. There's a lot more that goes on for dogs or animals in general. Yeah.
There is an element to that. So the five freedoms, which came out of a kind of a setup here in the UK actually called FAWC, FAWC, the Farm Animal Welfare Council.
Right.
We're looking at kind of that kind of thing, and they came up with the five freedoms initially, and they were mainly freedoms from. So
Yes.
freedoms from pain, but there were, and that's welfare. Well-being is more about freedom too, as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
We've got the five domains now, which
Yeah.
focuses more on these things. But actually, I still see a lot of people talking about welfare, welfare, welfare. Welfare is important. Welfare is about the um, overall, the grouping together, the important fundamental ticky box stuff. Well-being is about the individual.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, I can say for sure, I've got five dogs here today because I'm looking after some friends' dogs as well, that all their welfare needs are met. That's quite easy. Shelter, food, walk.
Mm.
But the well-being needs, I can't do that as a group because Molly's well-being needs are different to Harley's well-being needs.
Mm-hmm.
Well-being is about welfare is about safety, if you like.
Mm.
Um, well-being is about felt safety.
Mm-hmm.
You know, And this is very important uh, because a lack of emotional well-being, especially, is deeply damaging.
Mm,
Anybody who was that child who felt excluded at school, who's bullied in the playground, who sat quietly in the back of the class, and they might have done well at their exams, they might have got a degree, they might have done everything else, but they will have been harmed by that
hmm.
because they will have had to have come up with coping mechanisms to find a sense of well-being, and often those coping mechanisms aren't really fit for purpose long term. You know, so yeah, well-being is very
Well-being
important,
is very
I
important,
think.
I think. Yeah, that's a big topic, isn't it? That's something we really need to look at.
It is, but
Yes,
actually,
but
it's
actually,
like a lot of oh, I can hear a bit of feedback here. Don't know if you can hear it, but that's uh what I would say to your listeners who might be listening into this kind of thing for the first time.
yeah.
On one side, it seems really, oh my God, this is big. There's a lot of stuff here, and there is, but on the other side, it's actually really quite simple, which is giving ourselves time to be regulated ourselves and then allow another to share their survival story.
Oh, that's
Whether that's another
wonderful.
human
Yeah.
being or whether that's the dog. So actually, it's quite simple in that regard. Um, Understanding all the individual intricacies, understanding trauma-informed working, understanding the role of nervous system and pain, that you get extra layers there. But if I want to get to know about you and your needs and offer true care, it starts from me listening to you then, Joe. Not
Yeah.
questioning you, not challenging you, not putting you right if you say the wrong thing, just by
Mm,
offering a genuinely open space. And what I would say to dog trainers and behaviorists who want to work in a more trauma-informed way, and a lot of people are talking in those terms now,
yeah.
if you are truly working in a trauma-informed way, you have to check in with your practices with the client. There's no point being all understanding about the dog if you're challenging the client and making them feel unsafe, or you're not aware of their potential trauma that's led to their outlook on life. And
Hmm.
I saw a post by quite a well-known person recently talking about red flags on the clients and the red flags for her, which means she won't work with them. And I thought, well, that's not very trauma informed then, actually, because what you're saying is if somebody will listen to me, do the work, and do everything I say, that's the only person I'll work with. But actually, the
Mm,
people who really need us, and actually the dogs who really need us, are the people who need to go on a bit of a journey themselves. And we have to be better at improving our toolkit ourselves as a practitioner with counseling skills, listening skills, communication skills,
mm,
making sure that we have a sense of neutrality as we're there. I'm here to help. I want to support you through this process, and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good when we're
mm,
working on these cases. That's a truly trauma informed approach, I feel.
mm. I think if we're non-judgmental, if we're really open to listening to the human side of the equation of, the work we do, that often gives us a lot of insight into what's happening for the dog as well. And it goes vice versa as well. Yeah, so I think for the client to be able to trust us, with their story, so we can then understand the dog a bit more. And it's so important because we have to be there for the human side of the equation.
100%. And this is what's hard. I do get it because we are really passionate about removing pain and stress from dogs, but that awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, we have to do the same for our client. If they've been using aversive tools, even the big ones, say shock collars, we have to be accepting of that. How can we expect them to go through that process for their dogs if we can't even start that way? So I genuinely believe, and I've seen it with my own eyes with my clients, by being open, building a relationship, a trusting relationship, having conversations in a way that is open and isn't kind of pushing us into kind of whatever's black or white endings. Um, they're more likely to have that change in their outlook. They're more likely to understand that actually these things need reconsidering because we've provided a different mindset. And that is challenging for many colleagues. I know because there are many colleagues who are like, well, I won't work with you unless you get rid of that tool. And I understand that, but what's that about? That's about us projecting stuff. I remember working with a lady quite recently, this is a more recent one, who had a prong collar. And it was 6 or 7 months before she sent me this photo of the prong collar in the bin. And that wasn't like using it not. That was gradually trialing out different things that I was trying to show her, feeling confident in it. Because the reason she had the prong on in the first place with her quite big dog was because she'd been pulled out into the road and she nearly got run over. And in her mind, she felt this feels safe. Now I know
Mm.
actually it isn't, and she could still get pulled over again. We know all that stuff. But remember this thing about understanding the principle of the individual's lived experience. To her and her nervous system, this feels safe. Who am
Yeah.
I to make her feel unsafe in the hope that her dog might have a different tool? And
Yeah.
actually, if I'd have put a lot of pressure on her, she might have not used the tool when I was about. But does that mean she's genuinely left it behind? I do say to clients, while I'm here with you, I'm going to be using these tools instead.
Mm.
But I don't put any expectation on them to have to adopt that when I'm not until they feel safe to. But the good thing is we built that relationship and she was able to share with me about her safety needs and we were able to look at these different things. And, she really got into it and she'd send me an email saying, I had a whole walk on the new tools the other day. And I'm like,
Oh,
yes, brilliant. And she said, I haven't felt so good today, but yesterday I did. I thought, yeah. And what did Sarah teach us? Let the little wins give the biggest grin. So I thought, yeah, one day you've tried that. And your
yeah.
nervous system, it's a bit like going into the water for the first time and just putting your big toe in or just not kind of going in, just dragging your feet in. That might be
Mm.
enough for that day if your brain thinks don't like the water. But the next day you might do a bit more. You might actually go in the shallow end, and that's exactly that progression that she had, Joe. So we have to
Yeah.
think about this as we work, I think, about what is our role here.
Yeah. And we can't come in assuming that the client even knows what that is doing to their dog. If we come in just saying, I'm not going to work with people who use those tools, we might be missing an opportunity there to help someone to understand, they may, when you tell them what that shock collar does to a dog, physically, emotionally, and the prong collar, for example, they might not know that. And if and we need to help them understand that. But as you say, you don't want to come in there judgmental either and make them feel bad about what they're doing. That's not going to get
No,
you
and I think
anywhere.
it isn't. That's why we have to think about how do I approach this? For me, it's always about um, I set out a shared vocabulary with my clients quite early on, and there's just four things in it, just four. One is processing, because we talked about processing earlier. And I've got my doors of the brain analogy, which everybody's welcome to use. And that's just where I say to them, look, imagine your dog's brain has lots of little doors in it. We need to keep as many doors open as we can so your dog is able to process well, sensor integration can happen well, and the dog has a chance of being able to regulate. Pain, trauma, and stress of any kind, including excitement and frustration, big door closers.
Yeah.
They get that, Joe, because that's the same for us. We literally can't think straight. And I also
Mm.
say to them, especially if the dog's under 18 months, some of those doors that help to regulate emotional responses don't even start until 18 months. So under 18 months, some of those doors aren't even open yet.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing closes doors like trauma. And you can't force those doors open. They have to open when they're ready. But this gives them an idea then, because a lot of the time because they've been stuck in transactional training, they're like, oh yeah, my dog's so disobedient. Now we can reframe it and think, actually, at those times, that particular door might not be open. And this is the important bit, Joe, when we think about the doors. For us humans, the doors that are likely to start closing first are our more rational cognitive doors, and the
Mm-hmm.
doors that stay open are our survival doors. That's why we can all say and do things in the moment when we're a bit heated. For dogs, the first doors that are likely to start closing are the doors we put training behind, because most of
Mm-hmm.
that training has no internal safety value to the dog at all. The
No.
doors that stay open are their survival. So I'll talk about the doors. The next thing is about the nervous system, the good old bucket analogy. I know at ACE you use candles, but it doesn't matter what we
Candles. Yeah.
use really. The bucket is our nervous system. The water in our bucket is how much that nervous system is kind of. So I talk about elevation in the bucket, decompression out the bucket. The more that's in the bucket, the less doors we have open. It's as simple as that. We can relate. And then I just talk about relief and safety, which I don't have to go into a lot of detail about because they know what it feels like to want relief. They know what it feels like to feel safe.
Mm,
The good thing then is if I start setting that up and I talk about those things, then we can start doing our observations together. I can learn from them more. Then I can come back to, I like to use different kind of things really. So with things like choke chains and prongs, I talk about how the cranial nervous system is connected and how aggravation around the neck is likely to keep that bucket full. That's my in, not prongs are cruel. It's just I've got to try and remove some of that tension around the neck, really. And also, any kind of tension around here is likely to elevate our nervous system. It does for us, right? It makes you start thinking. So, oh, okay, right, I get that. Yeah. So, but I do hear what you said earlier about feeling safe. So I just want us to explore something else. So these are the things we look at. Something like the shock collar. Again, I don't talk about the fact that it's an electric shock collar and it's cruel. I talk about. I totally get why you're using because this is already they'd have explained to me why they're using it, so I totally get
mm,
it. I get what they want to do. But the thing that's driving that thing in the first place, the dog still is struggling to find safety or relief. So let's see if we can look at that. So it's how we approach it, Joe.
yeah.
I work with a guy. People have heard me share this story because it's quite powerful, really. And at the time, I struggled to hold back the tears, really, which I didn't want to be too emotional with the guy. But it really hit me hard. So I worked with this guy. He was ex-military. Um, uh, had this dog. The dog would bark at the dogs. He had a big, long leather lead, and he'd hit the dog with the lead when the dog barked. That was his coping mechanism. So we worked together. Um, he said to me at the end of the second session together, "Do you know what? I can see why I was hitting my dog now because I was angry and embarrassed." And I thought, wow, that's quite a revelation, then, isn't it? So this is the key, Joe. If we work differently, we can get better longer term outcomes for everybody. And those longer term outcomes aren't dog now behaving necessarily. That is about a caregiver is like, I get it. And I'm going to advocate for my dog. And I'm not trying to fix them because they ain't broken, but I am
Mm-hmm.
putting them into situations they can't cope with. Or I need to check in with myself here about my own emotional state. And he went on that journey. So we can work differently. And this is what I kind of try and educate about. But also, we have to recognize some clients don't shift. It doesn't matter how much we work, something in their own story, something in their own conditioning means or something in their own current desperation means that they'll end up with that shock jock down the road and they'll get the response they want. And that's
Mm,
their story, sadly. And we have to accept that. Remember, grief lies at acceptance. So there is an element of grief there for that dog who isn't going to get the relief that we could have offered. But we can't. We've just got to find ways that we can turn up emotion in an emotionally sustainable way as a professional and think, right. I call it the gift. I've talked to you about this. I know. My gift is I care and I want to help. That is a gift as far as I'm
mm,
concerned because I want to help them, I want to help the dog, and I will follow my process that I do. But I also recognize the thing about gifts is not everybody wants to receive them. So
yeah.
I think we just have to not, but that shouldn't stop us from wanting to offer it to the
Yeah.
next person. Do you want the
Yeah.
gift? Because I'm here. And some people, as we've spoken about before, kind of privately, we think we haven't got anywhere with somebody or whatever else. Then a couple of years down the line, they come round and they're like, you know, I've come the long way round here. I've worked out the hard way. But
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. Well, Andy, this has been so incredible. Um, Giving Australians an opportunity to hear what you've got to say, which is always so valuable. And and I really, really do thank you for coming on here and having a chat with all my listeners. And thank you. That's all I can say. Thank you so much. Hope you don't melt away over there during your heat wave you're having.
Yeah, it's the fifth one on the trot, so it's been a bit crazy, really. We might have to move to Australia to cool down a bit. That's the craziest thing I was thinking for. But
I'd be begging you to
yeah,
come. I know you don't like to do that long travel. No one does actually, though. I mean, I want to come over to you next year to the emotional animal emotional conference, but I'm still deciding whether to come or not. So we'll
well,
see.
hopefully do. It'd be great to see you, of course, always. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for having me, Joe.
Oh, look, thank you so much for coming, and I'm so excited to share this with everybody who joins in. So I will see you soon again later, but thank you so much again for being here, Andy. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.